Welcome back to the second part of our beginner web dev tutorial. My name is Calvin and I'm the COO at Hello World, and today I'm going to be teaching you a little bit of beginner CSS. CSS stands for Cascading Style Sheets, and it describes how HTML elements are displayed, and it's used for styling web pages like the one I have up now. Remember, if you want to open up your web page that you just created in the first part, you're going to open up your folder that your website is located in and double click on the index.html file. Right here I have a pretty basic website. It's similar to the one that Gabby just made, and right here you can see I have Atom open and I have all my code. But you'll notice that it does look a little bit bland, and so we'd like to make it look a little bit nicer using some of the CSS. So when we want to use CSS right in our HTML code, what we can do is come into any one of our element tags. Let's say I'll use the H1 tag here, and we're going to type in style equals, and then you're going to put all of your styles inside some quotation marks. We're going to start off by making this heading have a background. You're going to type in background with a colon. You can either type in colors, as long as it's a recognized color by CSS and HTML, or you can put in colors in hexadecimal by using a pound sign in front of it. Now if we save this and I go and refresh my site, you'll notice that I now have a pink background on my header. Something else we can do is, instead of background, we can change this to say color. Save it again. And now instead of the background, this has changed the text color to pink. Some other things we can mess with include the font style. If I copy and paste this over, you can see I use the font style tag to change my font to italics. If I save this and run it, you can see this paragraph up here becomes italicized. We can also then modify things like the font. So I can come over and change this list item by using the font family and changing it to sans serif. I think that's how you pronounce that. And as you can see, it changed the font of this list item. Let's take a look at a few more things we can modify before we move on to something a little more advanced. So you'll notice right here that I have a div tag. Now this is not an element that we used in the first tutorial, but what I can basically use this for is grouping together multiple elements like this, like my header and my list. And now if I'd like to pull over some styles, you'll see I'm using the border style here to give my div a border, and then I'm going to align all the text in it in the center. You'll notice that I use 3 different parameters for my border here. I gave it a pixel size for the border. I gave it a solid border type. I can also do something like dotted or dashed. And then I made it blue. And then since I'm going to do 2 different styles, I'm going to use a semicolon to separate these 2, and then use the text align center to put all my text in the middle. So if I save this and run it, you'll notice I get a nice dashed blue border, and I get all my text in the center. Now let's look at some padding. If I don't want my paragraph all the way over here on the left side, I can come into my paragraph tag, and I'm just going to copy and paste in a padding style that I wrote. And if I save this, you'll see I wrote padding left. I can also do top, bottom, or right, and I gave it a pixel size. You notice sometimes I have semicolons in here, sometimes I don't. It does not matter unless you have multiple styles in one style tag like this. If I refresh, I'm going to get some padding on the side here. And if you want to be accommodating to different screen sizes, instead of using pixels, you can use percentages. Let's say I want to do 50% on this padding. You'll see it pads it by 50%. One last thing I want to take a look at before we move on is that you can modify images like this. If I go over my image tag here and I put in a border, you'll see I get a border around this picture of my cat here. Alright, so this is cool and all, but you might be noticing that this gets a little bit crowded, especially if I want to do something like style all of my list items. It gets a little bit redundant and annoying to copy and paste all of this text into every single tag here. A little bit crowded, and a little bit unnecessary. So we're going to get rid of all of the styling we're doing inside of our tags, and we're going to put it inside of our styles.css file instead. So you'll notice that I've gone and removed all of my styling. My web page is back to how it used to be, and we're going to start off by styling my list items. Now before, it seemed to be pretty annoying that I'd have to go style each one of these individually to get them to all look the same. But what I can do instead, if I uncomment some code I wrote here, oops, I can write some code inside my styles.css file to change the list tag to always have the font family sans serif. Now, if I save this and run it, you'll notice nothing happens. It all stays the same. That's because my index.html file, despite being in the same folder as my styles.css file, does not recognize that it's actually trying to use this styles.css file. So we have to go put in a one-liner inside of our head that looks like this. Make sure that whatever you call your styles.css file is replicated right here in the name here. So if you call it just style.css, you're obviously going to need to get rid of the S or it's not going to work. If I save this code now and run this again, you'll notice that every single one of my list elements now has a new font. So I can also now do that with all of my paragraph tags. And something cool to notice is that if I were to delete this and type it in instead, Adam's going to start auto-populating some different options we have here. So this is a good way to learn some new styling techniques as it autofills. You'll notice too that in every single one of my lines here I am using a semicolon. And now if I save this, you'll notice that all my paragraphs have a purple background and white text. Now what if I want to write some styling that I would like to replicate on different element types? What I can do is create a class or an ID. We're going to start with a class. So how you write a class is by writing a period or a dot and then giving it a name. I called this one headings because I'd like to put it in the different types of heading tags that I used. Now, just like in this block of code up here, I'm going to use two curly braces, and on the inside, I'm going to change my background to this color. Then I'm going to, before I can do anything, I want to go back into my index.html file. I'm going to find the heading that I would like to put this in, and I'm going to write class equals headings in quotation marks. Now if I refresh, you'll notice that this heading now has a pink background. What's cool about classes is that I can use a class in multiple different tags. So if I want to come down and put it in my heading 3, oops, this will work as well. Now the last thing we're going to look at is called an ID. How you write an ID is by putting a pound sign or a hashtag and then giving it a name. Just like everything else, we're going to put everything we want to write inside curly braces. Here I'm going to give it a border of solid blue, and I'm going to do text align center, kind of like how I did before. The thing about IDs, however, is that you should use them to identify only one element. So I'm going to come back in here, and I'd like to use this on, oops, this div tag here. Make sure I named it right. I did. Now if I save this, you'll notice I get my nice blue border around this tag here. That is going to be it for this tutorial. We have only scratched the surface of what you can do with CSS. So I highly recommend that you go and look for some resources online. We're going to leave some of our favorites in the description, and go and learn what else you can do to modify your web page. I hope you have fun, and I'll see you next time.